Welcome back, everyone. We're on the third philosophical school of ethics, which is existentialism. Ethics, this is ethics based on the duty to the self, or we could say based on oneself. Ethics defined by one's own existence or personal identity. Existentialism kind of arises in the 1800s, early 1900s, and it arises as a rejection of deontological and utilitarian ethics. It kind of arises by rejecting those ethical systems. So the father of existentialism is the Dane Soren Kierkegaard. He rejects forms of teleological ethics through Hegel, and then he rejects deontological ethics of Kant through his great work called Fear and Trembling. If you haven't read Fear and Trembling, I highly recommend it. And he has the teleological suspension of the universal ethic, deriving that kind of starts the teleological suspension of the universal ethic. You have a universal ethic, categorical imperative, let's say. You can suspend that for a teleological reason, a goal-oriented reason. But for Kierkegaard, you can only suspend it by finding your identity. So the teleological suspension of the universal ethic comes from finding the self. So his great example, you guys got really proud of your thinking caps. His great example is Abraham sacrificing Isaac in Fear and Trembling. You guys know the story of Abraham and Isaac. God comes to Abraham and says, hey, kill me a son. You gotta kill Isaac. You gotta sacrifice Isaac. Abraham goes up to sacrifice Isaac on the mountaintop. God withholds his hand. Isaac is saved. There's a ram in the bushes, and they sacrifice the ram. Well, Kierkegaard reads that story and goes, why? And then, in the rest of the biblical narrative, Abraham's called a hero of faith, right? And Abraham, Kierkegaard comes and says, how can this be morally right? If there's a deontological command, for not killing, not murdering someone, how can it be morally right to kill Isaac's son, or at least have the intention to kill him? And he says it can be morally right because you can suspend that universal law of not killing, the deontological command. You can suspend it for a teleological purpose or some goal purpose. That purpose, A, is to honor God. But that only works, the teleological suspension of the universal ethic only works because when you commune with God, you're fulfilling your individual design or purpose as a human. Yourself is being fulfilled when you do that. So the self-fulfillment, your own existence, tells you that you can do this command. That's existentialism. Father of existentialism, Soren Kierkegaard. Another prominent existentialist is Jean-Paul Sartre. He has a lot of famous works. I don't know if you guys had to read Nausea when you were in high school. I make these high school kids read the craziest stuff. But Nausea, that was him. Albert Camus is like a contemporary who's also an existentialism. The Stranger by Camus kind of is the same school as Sartre. Yeah, I don't know if you had to read The Stranger. They shouldn't do that. That's why you're all existentialists, because you read The Stranger and nausea and you don't know what you're doing. So Sartre, he has a famous set of lectures called La Existentialism et la Humanism, or Existentialism is Humanism. And he defines existentialism as existence preceding essence. Existence preceding essence. Essence, of course, coming, not essence in the philosophical term, coming from Plato. Essence in like, I'm a human. What's my essence? I bear the image of God. That's my essence as a human being. The essence of a human is to bear the image of God. What makes a human, not a dog? That's their essence, right? You can think of it like, usually the ancients had a separation between particulars or incidentals and essence. Incidentals are things that accompany the essence, but aren't the essence. So I'm a human. I have 5 fingers on each hand. I got 5 toes. You cut off one of my toes, I'm still fully human. So that means that's just an incidental. An essence would be if you take it away from the human, he wouldn't be a human anymore. For Christians, that's the image of God. If you took away the image of God from me, I wouldn't be a human anymore. So that's the essence. So Sartre is saying, you exist, and then you decide what your essence is. You exist, and then you get to decide what makes you a human. That's why we're in the kind of crazy situation we're in as a society. People exist, and then they decide themselves what makes them human, what gives them happiness, what does all that. So existentialism, for Sartre, I like Kierkegaard's understanding of existentialism more than Sartre's, but there's multiple individuals who are existentialism, and their schools kind of interact. But for Sartre, existentialism is existence. You exist, and then you decide your essence. You decide what gives you meaning. You decide what makes you a human. You decide what brings you joy. So that's existentialism. All right. Until next time.